For a full 3 seconds I just stared at him, wondering if I'd misheard. Or if the founder's son had finally inhaled enough vape smoke to kill the last surviving brain cell in his skull. My girlfriend is taking your office and your position. Be out by noon. He said it with the confidence of a man who once microwaved aluminum foil, and then blamed the microwave. I burst out laughing. Not a polite chuckle. No, this was the kind of laugh that erupts when life becomes so stupid it circles all the way back to comedy. Good luck then, I replied, grabbing my coffee and walking past him like he was a speed bump someone had painted gold and called valuable. Behind me, I could feel his confusion beginning to crackle. I didn't give him the satisfaction of looking back. Because here's the thing. I already knew this company was headed straight for a flaming train wreck. They just didn't know I was the airbag they were about to remove. Let me rewind. For 9 years I had been with Harbor Tech Logistics. 9 years of cleaning up messes, of ensuring legal compliance, of translating nonsense into workable procedures, and keeping regulators from breathing down our necks. Years of late nights, missed birthdays, fixing disaster after disaster created by rich men who believed compliance was optional and consequences were for other people. The founder, William Hale, used to respect me. Then his son, Tanner, MBA from my dad paid for this university, returned from Bali with a tan, a bracelet made of shells, and a girlfriend he called a visionary. Her real name was Sabrina, but she preferred to introduce herself as Bree with an I, not a Y. Wise chaotic energy. She posted affirmations on Instagram like, "Girl boss isn't a mindset, it's a frequency," and money flows effortlessly to those aligned with luxury. Which was bold for someone who didn't have a job until Tanner decided she deserved mine. The meeting where they announced this was supposed to be a leadership transition. That's what the calendar invite said. I walked into the glass conference room expecting a restructuring announcement. Instead, I found Tanner, leaning back in his chair like a bargain bin Bond villain. And Sabrina was perched beside him in a fur jacket, sipping iced matcha and kicking her heels against the chair like a toddler. So Tanner began, smiling like he'd just solved world hunger. We're moving the company into a new era, fresh, bold, modern, and we want leadership to reflect that. Sabrina's voice had that influencer softness that made everything sound like a sponsored meditation app. It's nothing personal, Ellen. We just feel your energy doesn't align with where Harbor Tech is going. My energy. Right. The same energy that kept us legal when Tanner once tried to classify warehouse forklift drivers as creative subcontractors to avoid payroll taxes. I waited for Tanner to blink first. He didn't. So I stood, gathered my things, my planner, my certifications, my beloved worn-in mug, and walked out. No begging, no arguing, no scene. But inside my brain was whispering one sentence. They have no idea what they just did. What Tanner and Bree didn't know was that 12 days earlier, after months of ignored warnings, unanswered emails, and compliance violations so reckless they could wake the dead, I had filed a formal withdrawal as the designated regulatory officer. It was stamped, notarized, logged, legally airtight. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I wasn't going to prison because Tanner thought OSHA was a vibe killer, and environmental permits were optional if no one complains. And here's the fun part. When a company in our industry loses its compliance officer, the system gives them 30 days to appoint a new one. Day 30 was tomorrow. So the next morning, I sat in my car across the street with a cappuccino and watched it unfold like live theater. At exactly 8:04 a.m., a city inspector in a navy jacket walked up to the front entrance, pulled out a rolled red notice, and taped it to the glass. Operation suspended. Behind him, employees gathered like ducks watching a magician pull a grenade instead of a rabbit. Then Tanner sprinted outside, sleep-haired, shoes untied, panic already sweating through his shirt. He read the notice. His face went pale. Then he screamed, "What did you do?" To the inspector, to the universe, to the ghost of common sense that had abandoned him years ago. And I sat there sipping my coffee, smiling because this wasn't revenge. This was accountability. And accountability hits different when it finally arrives. Tanner stood there on the sidewalk like a malfunctioning statue, staring at the red notice taped to the glass. His mouth was open but no sound came out. Just a faint wheeze like his soul was trying to escape. Inside, employees hovered behind the glass wall, eyes wide, hands over mouths, phones recording. Someone whispered loud enough for me to hear through my car window. "Oh my God, She warned them. No one said my name, but they didn't have to. Guilt recognizes the person it failed. And in that moment, watching Tanner frantically tap the locked door like it would magically unseal if he pushed hard enough, something inside me finally unclenched. 9 years of stress, swallowed opinions, quiet confidence, and cleaning up other people's recklessness had finally paid off. Now, to be clear, I didn't tank the company. They tanked themselves. I just stopped holding up the collapsing beams. For the last year, Harbor Tech had been playing Russian roulette with government regulations. And every time I tried to intervene, I got brushed off with, "We'll handle it later. Stop being dramatic. Compliance is fear-based thinking." Or my personal favorite from Sabrina, "Rules are a social construct. Sweetheart, so is prison, but it's still very real." Let's rewind about 3 months. Harbor had landed a major contract with the State Port Authority. A big one, multi-year, high scrutiny, involving hazardous storage and interstate logistics, meaning everything had to be airtight. Reports, audits, certifications, all filed on time. And for the first 6 months I kept everything on track barely. Because while I was doing my job, Tanner was busy creating culture, which meant beanbag chairs in the lounge, motivational posters that said things like, "Chaos means progress," and mandatory team-building sessions involving blindfolds and kombucha shots. Meanwhile, our compliance inbox looked like a graveyard of good intentions. Missing documentation, outstanding audit, schedule overdue, legal follow-up required. Every ignored message wasn't just a loose thread. It was a lit fuse. The turning point came one evening at 10:14 p.m. I was at my desk finishing revisions for the environmental impact renewal when an email popped up from the compliance review board. Urgent final notice before enforcement action. That wasn't a warning. That was the last step before consequences. I forwarded it to Tanner, the founder, and Sabrina, who by then was already unofficially involved in decisions she had no qualifications for. 5 minutes later, Sabrina replied, "No punctuation, no greeting. Can this wait until after the lunar retreat? I'm not in a mental space for stress." A compliance violation threatening hundreds of jobs and millions in contracts, and she wanted to wait until after her yoga retreat. I stared at the screen until the absurdity settled into certainty. They weren't going to take responsibility, so I stopped absorbing the impact. 2 weeks later, after documenting every warning, every missed deadline, every red flag, I contacted my attorney. Not to sue, not yet, just to ask one question. If a company ignores compliance responsibilities and refuses to act, am I legally obligated to stay responsible for the consequences? His answer: no, but you need to resign officially with proof, signatures, and time-stamped filings. Make sure you keep records. So I did. Signed, notarized, uploaded, certified. I notified leadership. I sent the withdrawal notice to legal. I even included the reference codes and compliance deadlines they needed to meet to stay operational. No drama, no revenge plan, just a boundary. And every single person in that chain either skimmed it, ignored it, or assumed I was bluffing. Back in the present, Tanner finally stopped slapping the locked glass door and spun toward the inspector. His voice cracked like a teenager denied concert tickets. "There has to be a mistake. We have a compliance officer." The inspector, mid-50s, government badge, coffee cup that said, "Don't confuse Google with my degree," didn't blink. No registered compliance officer has been assigned since April. Under State Statute 9-14B, operating without one is grounds for immediate suspension. Tanner blinked. "Okay. Well, how do we fix it?" The inspector shrugged, not unkindly. "You appoint someone qualified, submit documentation, pass review. Could take weeks. Months, depending on penalties." "Months?" Tanner squeaked. "Possibly longer." Inside the building, someone gasped. Another person quietly sat down on the floor. And Sabrina, yes, she was there now, whispered loudly enough for the street to hear. "Wait, is this because Ellen left?" The inspector looked at her, confused. But I knew. Everyone did. Harbor wasn't spoiled by bad luck. It was collapsing under the weight of ignored responsibility, and whether they liked it or not, I wasn't coming back to catch them. By noon, the news had spread through the building faster than free donuts. Harbor Tech's doors remained sealed. The red suspension notice bright against the glass like a warning label on poison. Employees drifted in small clusters on the sidewalk, whispering, texting, calling spouses, pacing like people waiting for bad medical results. And somewhere in the middle of that chaos, Tanner vanished. Not physically, no, he was still inside, but mentally he was gone. His swagger was replaced with the posture of a man trying to remember if crying was allowed in corporate leadership handbooks. I watched all of this from across the street with a sandwich, and the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you followed the rules and someone else didn't. My phone buzzed. It was Maria, one of the analysts who used to work under me. Ellen, did you know this was coming? I stared at the message. Did I know? Yes. Did I cause it? No. I just stopped being the human firewall between incompetence and consequence. I typed back. I warned them more than once. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Maria. They're saying you sabotaged the company. I let out a small laugh, quiet, tired, unsurprised. Me. If telling the truth counts as sabotage, maybe they shouldn't have lied to themselves. She heart-reacted the message. No follow-up. People always assume revenge requires action. Sometimes revenge is simply stepping away and letting people experience the results of their own decisions. By early afternoon, the founder arrived. I knew he was coming before I saw him because the energy shifted. Conversations died. Employees straightened. The air got heavier. William Hale stepped out of a black SUV. Posture rigid, face set like concrete. He didn't rush. He walked toward the entrance with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who hated surprises and hated public embarrassment even more. He stopped in front of the red notice, read it, then read it again. He didn't swear. He didn't yell. He just exhaled long and slow, the sound of someone realizing exactly how much had been ignored. Finally, he turned to the inspector. "What do we need to do?" he asked, voice steady but sharp. The inspector lifted a clipboard. "First step. Assign a new designated compliance officer." Silence stretched. Then Tanner appeared beside him, hair messy, face flushed, expression equal parts fear and hope. "Dad, I can fix this," he insisted. "I just need her paperwork." "Her?" The founder stared at him. "Who?" Tanner cleared his throat. "Ellen." Like the name physically hurt to say. The founder blinked. "Ellen doesn't work here anymore." Tanner shifted. "I thought she'd still help." The founder turned his head slowly, like he feared he might snap something if he moved too fast. "You fired her." "No," Tanner said quickly. I replaced her." "With who?" And there she was, Sabrina, standing half behind Tanner, holding a designer tote bag like a shield. She lifted her hand in a small wave. "Hi," she said softly. "We haven't officially met." The founder closed his eyes, not dramatically, just like he needed a moment of silence for his own sanity. When he looked at Tanner again, there was no yelling, just cold clarity. "You replaced our compliance officer," he said flatly, "with your girlfriend." "She's not just my girlfriend," Tanner started, but the founder cut him off. "What are her certifications?" Sabrina blinked. "Certifications?" He stared. "You replaced a state-registered compliance specialist with someone who doesn't know what a certification is." Sabrina's face flushed pink. "I'm very motivated," she whispered. The founder looked like he aged 5 years in 5 seconds. He didn't speak again, not to the inspector, not to Tanner, not to anyone. He simply turned and walked back toward his SUV. My phone buzzed again. It was a number I didn't recognize. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. "Ellen speaking." A server appeared with 2 coffees. He didn't touch his. I sipped mine. "So," he said finally, folding his hands on the table, "I need you to return temporarily to help us undo this situation." There was no arrogance in his tone now, just necessity. I nodded once. "I'll consider it, but I'm not coming back under the same structure." His eyebrows lifted slightly, not offended, just listening. "All right," he said. "Tell me what you want." I didn't rush. If there's one thing corporate environments teach you, it's that silence is a language. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. "First, I'm not your employee. I'll return as an external consultant." He nodded slowly. "Second, I set my own hours. I am not on call, and I'm not available for panic-driven demands at midnight." Another nod. "Third, I work directly with you. Not Tanner, not Sabrina. Not anyone else trying to cosplay leadership." This time he didn't nod immediately. His jaw tightened just slightly, but then he agreed. And finally, I said, meeting his eyes, my rate. He leaned back. Name it. I slid a paper across the table. He read it. His eyebrows shot upward. That's higher than what we paid you in salary for a year. That's because, I said, taking another sip, I'm not here to fix small mistakes. I'm here to save you from a state-level shutdown and breach of contract lawsuits. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He simply folded the paper, tucked it into his suit jacket and said, send the formal agreement. I'll sign. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he asked what I knew was coming. Why didn't you tell me directly? I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't clueless. He wasn't incompetent. He was guilty of something far more common in leadership. Delegation without oversight. You didn't want to hear it, I said calmly. And your son made sure nothing reached you unless it fit his narrative. His jaw clenched. And Sabrina? He asked. I almost smiled. She thinks regulations are negotiable, and she believed that because Tanner never corrected her. He closed his eyes for a moment, processing, recalibrating. When he opened them, there was something new there. Humility. Ellen, he said, voice lower. If I had known. I held up a hand. Knowing wasn't the issue. Listening was. He nodded once, not defensively, not reluctantly, but in acceptance. Before he left, he said one more thing. Thank you for not letting this get worse. I met his gaze. I didn't save the company. I saved myself. What happens to Harbor Tech now depends on whether anyone finally learns the difference between leadership and entitlement. He absorbed that with a slow, thoughtful nod. Then he stood, straightened his jacket, and left. As soon as he stepped outside, my phone buzzed again. This time not from an employee, from Tanner. A single message, we need to talk, please. I stared at it, expression flat. For years, Tanner treated compliance as something beneath him, something boring, restrictive, bothersome. Now it was the only thing standing between him and a disaster with his name on it. I typed a reply, schedule it through your father. I don't discuss business over text. I hit send, set the phone down, and finished my coffee. Because for the first time in 9 years, they needed me more than I needed them. And that shift was only the beginning. By the end of the week, Harbor Tech looked less like a company and more like a hospital waiting room after a disaster. Quiet, tense, everyone pretending everything was fine while knowing it absolutely wasn't. I walked in Monday morning not as staff, not as someone desperate to prove value, but as a contracted specialist with a laptop bag, a calm expression and full control of the situation. The red notice was still taped to the door. But inside, the energy had shifted. People straightened when they saw me. Not out of fear but relief. Someone whispered, "Thank God she's here." Funny how quickly reputation transforms once people realize competence is not a personality type. It's a lifeline. At exactly 9:02 a.m., the founder called the leadership meeting to order. Tanner sat at the conference table, hair brushed, posture stiff, expression somewhere between apology and ego, desperately clinging to relevance. Sabrina, as I packed up to leave, Tanner approached, not with swagger, but with something resembling humility. "Ellen," he said quietly, "I didn't take any of this seriously. I thought rules just slowed success." I looked at him, not angry, not triumphant, just honest. "Rules don't block success, Tanner. They keep success standing." He nodded, absorbing it. It would take time, but maybe, just maybe, he'd learn. When I stepped outside, the cold air felt different. Not sharp, but clean. I wasn't leaving defeated. I was leaving in control. Behind me, people were fixing what had been broken, not because I told them to, but because consequences finally taught them why they needed to. And that was the real message. Revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes revenge is simply walking away.